She walked into the most dangerous office in New York and fixed a mafia boss's tie. Not because she was brave, because she didn't know yet what kind of man he was. He warned her, "This world eats soft things alive." She looked him dead in the eye and said, "I'm tougher than I look." She had no idea that one quiet morning would pull her into a war between empires, where the only thing standing between her and a bullet was the man who was supposed to be her boss. Welcome to a channel where power, passion, and sacrifice collide, stories of mafia bosses who discover that love is the one empire they never planned to build, and families forged in fire who choose each other anyway. Because sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is walk into the storm and refuse to run. If this story already has your heart racing, drop A in the comments. Share it with someone who loves a love story with teeth, and hit subscribe so you never miss what comes next.
I still see her standing in that elevator, climbing 43 floors in total silence, hands clasped, staring at the numbers, trying to be invisible. Around here, we all thought invisible was the only way to be safe, the only way to get paid. The doors opened to that marble and glass executive suite, and the first thought in my head was that I should have told her to turn around and get right back on. I was the one sitting behind that reception desk, offering a smile that was all polish and no warmth. "Mr. Moretti is expecting you," I told her, my voice betraying nothing of the pity I felt. "End of the hall, double doors, don't knock." My stomach twisted as she nodded and walked away. That hallway was a gauntlet. Her heels clicked on the tile, a lonely sound against the low hum of deals being made in glass-walled offices. The art on the walls, all those violent slashes of color, felt like a warning I was forbidden to give. I watched the men in their expensive suits track her progress, their eyes cold and indifferent. When she reached those imposing wooden doors, she just pushed them open and walked in. I knew what was in there. A massive desk, shelves of unread books, and the scent of cedar and something sharp, like winter air. And I knew he was in there, a silhouette against the city, Adrian Moretti. I'd seen his corporate headshot. It was a lie. A picture could never capture the raw presence of the man, the way the whole room seemed to bend around him. I heard the low murmur of his voice, and I knew her test had begun. She told me about it later, over hushed coffees when she thought I was a friend. "Everyone calls me Adrian," he'd insisted, circling her like a predator. She described the charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, the slightly loosened tie that somehow made him seem even more menacing. I imagine her reaching out to shake his hand, a small, brave act of normalcy. He would have held on a second too long, searching her eyes. I'd filed her glowing references from Morrison and Associates and the Blackwell Group myself. I knew how impressive they were. He would have listed them off, a reminder that he knew everything about her. As she sat in that chair, composed and professional, he would have studied her, trying to find a weakness. "What do you think I do?" The question was legendary around the office, his favorite little test. And she, unlike anyone before her, had the perfect answer. "My own regret is a bitter pill." I saw her strength, but I was too afraid to offer my own. "You take calculated risks," she'd told him. "You see opportunities where others see obstacles, and you don't tolerate incompetence." I was stunned when she recounted that part to me. I can just see him moving to the window, the faintest hint of a smile on his lips. "And what makes you think you won't be incompetent?" he'd asked. Her reply still gives me chills. "Because I don't make the same mistake twice." He must have loved that. Then came the litany of rules I knew by heart. Start immediately. The desk right outside his door. The coffee, black, no sugar, no small talk, no holidays. Take a message unless the building is on fire. I watched from my desk as she scribbled it all down in a little notebook, so unaware of the real game she was playing. And then she asked about his dietary restrictions for travel. It was so thoughtful, so completely out of place in that cold world, that for a second, I felt a flicker of hope for her. But it was the story about his tie that I always come back to. She told me she just stood up, right in the middle of their meeting, and said, "It's crooked." She walked right up to him and fixed it. Her fingers brushing the silk, the heat of his body so close, that scent of cedar and smoke all around her. And that's when he caught her wrist. Not hard, she said, but with a firmness that was absolute. Her breath caught as he held her there, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The people who work for me don't last long," he'd warned. "This world eats soft things alive." His thumb drew a slow circle over her pulse. "You seem soft, Lena Hayes." I should have warned her. I should have told her that was his favorite line, the one he used right before he broke someone. But she just met his gaze. "I'm tougher than I look," she'd said. When he finally let her go, I know that's the moment she was truly trapped. I watched her walk out of his office, refusing to let her hands shake as she collected her notebook. She looked rattled, but she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing it. "I'll be at my desk," she'd said, her voice steady. From behind the door, I heard his parting shot. "Welcome to Moretti Capital." She sank into the leather chair at the desk that would become her post, the gatekeeper to his world, and let out a single, slow breath. Then, right on cue, Marcus Chen from Acquisitions leaned against her desk, his slick smile already in place, asking if Adrian had scared her off yet. I stayed quiet, pretending to sort mail, pretending I didn't see. I was a coward then. But not anymore. In the digital archives, there's a misplaced catering order for the Agalala event, time-stamped, proving she was somewhere else when it all went down. I'm printing it, and I'm leaving it on her chair for everyone to find. It's not much, but it's not silence. I remember the first day she walked in. I tried to give her the standard warning. I leaned in, keeping my voice low so he wouldn't hear through his office door. "Just a heads up," I said. "He's on a different wavelength. It's not personal, it's just business to him. Don't expect warm and fuzzy." I thought about him, the intensity he projects, the way he seems to x-ray people. "Not an emotional guy," I told her. She just nodded, saying she got it, and then opened her computer. I offered her a lifeline, an invitation for Friday drinks with us. It's how we all cope, you know? She gave a non-committal, maybe. And I let it go, tapping her desk before walking off. I watched from my desk as she started on the Bellamy file. Then, I saw the summons, an internal message, and she was up. He called her into conference room B. My stomach tightened. I know that room. It's where deals are bled for, where careers end. I watched her go in, just her and those three sharks, with him at the head of the table gesturing for her to sit. I should have said more. I couldn't hear a thing, but I saw the shadows moving behind the frosted glass. They were talking about the Bellamy deal. I was sure of it. His board was getting edgy. Word was traveling. But Adrian, he thrives on that kind of pressure. He always knows something no one else does. I imagined the scene inside. Him, cool as ice, dropping some bomb on them. I saw Lena's silhouette pause, her head lift. He must have said it then, the thing that silenced the room. I can picture old Henderson, the one with the scar, leaning forward, asking how. And I can hear Adrian's reply in my head, that he makes it his business to know. It's his favorite line. He would have laid out his plan, a ruthless, brilliant strategy to gut the company and sell the parts. That's his move. I saw the men's shadows shift, then nod. It wasn't a discussion, it was a command. He stood, and they were dismissed. They all filed out, looking like they'd just been in a pressure cooker. But she stayed behind with him. I felt a knot of dread. He was probably asking if she had questions. I wondered if she'd dare to ask the right one, about how he gets his information. I saw him talking, his posture relaxed, but I knew better. It's a performance. He can seem almost charming when he wants to, drawing you in, making you feel like you're part of something big and secret. It's a trap. She came out a minute later, face unreadable, and went back to her desk. The rest of the day was a blur of activity around her. I saw the calls, the emails, the frantic pace. I tried to find an excuse to talk to her twice, just to see if she was okay, but she was completely focused. By 6, I was heading out with the others, but she was still there. I glanced back and saw him standing over her desk. My gut clenched. I couldn't hear what they said, but it looked intense, personal. I should have stayed. I know I should have. Instead, I went home. But I couldn't shake the image of her at that desk, looking so small in that huge, empty office with him towering over her. I kept thinking about her saying she needed the job, the quiet desperation I'd sensed. We all need our jobs, but she felt different, like she was carrying something heavy. I wondered about her story. Did she have family to support? Piles of debt? I imagined her life outside those glass walls, a world away from his corporate kingdom. I hoped she had a safe place to land, a quiet apartment where she could breathe. I felt that familiar guilt creeping in, the kind that comes from seeing a storm on the horizon and just watching. I should have insisted she come for that drink, pulled her away from that place for just an hour. But I didn't. I just went home, leaving her alone with him in that silent, imposing space. I replayed it all in my head, staring at my own ceiling. Her interview must have gone well, but did she know what she was really signing up for? The work itself is one thing. It's him that's the problem. The way he watches people, like he's figuring out their breaking points. He has a way of making you feel seen, but it's not comforting. It's like being sized up by a predator. She struck me as someone who had built walls, someone who knew how to survive. But his kind of pressure finds the cracks. It pries them open. I know because I've seen it happen to others. It's unsettling. It's a risk I wouldn't want anyone to take, especially not her. I finally fell asleep, hoping the next day would be easier on her, that she'd find her footing and keep him at a professional distance. When I got in at 7:30 the next morning, her light was already on. She was there before him, but the chaos had already begun. I remember the first time I saw her, the day it all started. I was just grabbing coffee when I heard Moretti's voice cutting through his office door, a one-sided war over the phone. "Let him try," he'd snarled, and the chill was palpable even through the oak. A moment later, she walked in, Lena. She looked bright, capable, utterly unprepared for the storm she was walking into. I watched as the phone on her new desk lit up almost instantly. From my cubicle, I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the way her posture straightened, the subtle frown. It was Victor, I knew it. I could always tell. She glanced at Moretti's closed door, a soldier looking at the general's tent. I should have said something then, walked over and told her to turn around and leave. But I just sat there. 20 minutes later, Moretti came out, looking like he'd just closed a billion-dollar deal, not threatened a man's existence. He saw the note she'd made about the call, and his face hardened. I saw him toss it. That little piece of paper was the first link in a chain, and I just watched her forge it, my own silence a heavy weight in my gut. He told her to ignore Victor's calls indefinitely. I saw the hesitation in her eyes, the question she was too new to ask. I knew about Victor Castellano, about the darkness that clung to his name. Moretti called him a competitor, but I'd heard other words used in hushed tones, words that tasted like blood and fear. I saw the morning swallow her whole, a whirlwind of meetings and calls. That's why I brought the sandwiches. It felt like the least I could do, a pathetic apology for my silence. "Drinking from a fire hose?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She just nodded, her eyes wide. I gave her the company line about Moretti being a machine, about learning the rhythm. It felt like a lie. I was teaching her how to survive in a cage, not how to thrive in an office. She asked about his personal life, and I nearly choked. I gave her a warning, the best I could manage. "Don't dig too deep," I'd said. What I wanted to say was, "Get out before it's too late." But the words wouldn't come. Cowardice has a taste, it's bitter like old coffee. She thought he was a machine, but I knew better. I'd seen the cracks in his armor, the moments of humanity he tried so hard to hide. When she asked about his life outside of work, I fumbled for an answer. Other obligations, I'd called them. A ridiculously sterile term for the violent world Moretti inhabited when he wasn't here. I saw the curiosity in her eyes and knew my vague warning wasn't enough. Keep your head down, I advised, hating myself for it. I was telling her to do exactly what I was doing, hiding. A few hours later, I saw them head into conference room A. Adrian, with two men who were definitely not on the company payroll. They moved with a quiet efficiency that screamed danger. One was built like a brick wall, the other had eyes that missed nothing. I knew who they were. They were the physical manifestation of Moretti's other obligations. They were his security, and their presence meant the threat was no longer distant. It was here. I watched from my desk as James, the mountain of a man, briefed her. I couldn't hear everything, but I saw him hand her a new security badge. Then I saw the panic button. My blood ran cold. We'd had security protocols before, but never anything like this. Never for an assistant. Her question was clear even from a distance. Threat assessment? Moretti's dismissal was too quick, too sharp. I saw the tension in his shoulders, a stiffness that wasn't there before. This wasn't a precaution. This was a reaction. She was being drawn into the war, whether she knew it or not. I saw Moretti leave her there with James, his face a mask of control. I felt a surge of something, pity, fear, shame. I was a part of this machine, oiling the gears with my inaction. James's words echoed in my mind from a briefing I'd once had. Mr. Moretti doesn't take chances with his people. I knew what that meant. It meant she was now a piece on the board, a target, and I was letting it happen. The rest of the afternoon was a siege. I saw the light on her phone flash over and over. Victor Castellano. Each time she answered, her back got a little straighter, her voice a little firmer. But I could see the toll it was taking. After one call, I saw her hands shake as she put the receiver down. She walked into Moretti's office, and a few minutes later, he was speaking in that low, intense Italian he used when things were serious. I saw him tell her what to do next time Victor called, and I watched her nod. But then he called her sweetheart. I overheard her tell Moretti that part, and I saw a look in his eyes I'd only seen once before, right before a rival's company mysteriously folded overnight. A cold, possessive fury. It wasn't about business anymore. For Moretti, this had just become personal. And for Lena, that was infinitely more dangerous. I knew then that my silence was no longer an option. It was a betrayal. He told her to report anything that made her uncomfortable. A call, an email, a look. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a command. I saw him cross the room to her, his movements fluid and predatory. He wasn't just her boss. He was her protector, her captor. He called Victor a predator. But as I watched him stand over her, so close, I thought the same could be said of him. He touched her face, and the tenderness of the gesture was terrifying. You walked into my world wearing hope like armor, he murmured, and I finally understood. He wasn't just protecting an employee. He was drawn to the very thing he knew this world would destroy in her. That night, after they were both gone, I walked over to her empty desk. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pulled a pen from my pocket and scrawled a note on a plain sticky pad. He's not the only one with enemies. Be careful who you trust. I left it in the center of her keyboard, a small, anonymous act of defiance. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was a flicker of hope, not hers, but mine. Model, when he finally left her alone, the air around her desk felt charged. Then day 3 came, and the storm broke. The call came through at 9 a.m. sharp. Victor Castellano. I recognized the name from the whispers. I put him through, and from my desk, I watched Adrian's face turn to granite. He listened for less than a minute before slamming the phone down. The calm was gone. He came out of his office, a man on a mission, and looked right at her. Pack a bag, I heard him say. We're going to Chicago. Now. For 2 or 3 days. He was a whirlwind of action, and she just kept pace, making the calls, handling the logistics. 18 minutes later, they were walking toward the elevator. This was it. I couldn't just stand by anymore. As they passed, I stepped up to her. "Lena," I said quietly, pressing a folded piece of paper into her hand. "Just in case." It had my number on it. My real number. "If you need anything. Anything at all." She glanced at it, her eyes wide for a second, then gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod before the elevator doors closed. It all started the day we touched down in Chicago. I remember the weight of the silence in the SUV as I pulled away from the private airstrip. He was in the back, all business, a predator on the phone, switching between languages like he was changing suits. And she was beside him, quiet, observant, taking notes. I'd seen women with him before, but she was different, sharper, not yet broken. That's what bothered me. The yet. My job is simple. Drive, don't listen, don't see. But you always see. I saw the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. It wasn't professional. It was possessive. We pulled up to the hotel, one of those downtown places where money buys silence. I opened her door, and for a second our eyes met. I wanted to say something. "Be careful. This isn't what you think." But I just nodded and took their bags, the words dying in my throat. I spent the next few hours parked across the street, watching the 20th floor, a knot of guilt tightening in my gut. I was just the driver, a ghost in their world. But even ghosts have regrets, and I knew I was already collecting a new one. At 5 minutes to 8, I saw them leave. She wore a simple black dress, elegant. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my car. He looked like a king, and she looked like his beautiful, captive prize. I followed them to a place on the near north side with no name on the door, the kind of joint you only get into if you're already on the inside. He walked in like he was born there. I stayed with the car, the engine off, and watched the street. It was my life, waiting in the dark while powerful men made deals that ruined other people. An hour passed, then two. I knew who was in there. I'd driven Mr. Moretti to meet Sal and his crew before. They weren't the kind of men you had a casual dinner with. They were sharks, and my boss was the biggest one in the tank. I thought about her, Lena. What did she know about these people? Did she understand the game she was now a part of? When they finally came out, the air was thick with unspoken threats. The men he'd met with looked grim. He looked energized. He held the door for her, his hand on her back, and the casual touch was a brand, a claim. In the rearview mirror, I saw her face, pale and strained. She was starting to understand. And I just kept driving, my silence making me a part of it all. I hated myself for it. I hated the job. But I kept driving. They didn't find anything to investigate, he'd said in the car, his voice a low rumble of confidence that chilled me more than the Chicago wind. It wasn't the confidence of an innocent man. It was the confidence of a man who never gets caught. He was talking about some guy named Victor, laying out a plan to ruin him with a calm that was almost inhuman. He was building a war, and she was sitting right in the middle of it. The ride back to the hotel was dead quiet. I could feel her fear, a living thing in the back seat. In the elevator bay, I unloaded their briefcases, and their voices echoed slightly. "What just happened?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He told her he was reminding an enemy that threats cut both ways. He was teaching her his language, violence and power. He saw it as a lesson. I saw it as a cage being built around her, bar by bar. I watched him stop her at her door, watched him touch her face. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the look, the raw, undisguised hunger. I got back in the car and just sat there for a long time, the engine off. "You should have said something," I told the empty vehicle. "You should have done something." But what could I do? I was just the driver. That look he gave her. It's what kept me up that night. It's a look I've seen before, in other cities, with other women. It's the look that comes before the fall. I know my place. I'm paid to drive, to be invisible, to forget what I see and hear. But how do you forget the feeling that you're chauffeuring someone toward their own destruction? You can't. You just add it to the pile of things you try to drink away on your day off. I thought about her, alone in that suite next to his. Did she know how thin that connecting door really was? He'd see her intelligence as a challenge, her strength as something to be bent to his will. People like her, smart and capable, they think they can handle men like Moretti. They think they can play the game without getting burned. But the house always wins in his world. And I was the one who kept driving them to the casino, my silence a constant, damning endorsement of the whole rotten affair. I wondered if she was scared. I hoped she was. Fear, at least, was a sign she was still fighting. I remember the day it all started to feel wrong. Around 6 a.m., I saw her light was on, too early for a guest on business. By 7, when I brought fresh towels, she was already a fortress. Gray suit, hair pulled tight, a professional mask that couldn't quite hide the exhaustion from a sleepless night. She was staring at a laptop, but her focus was on his door, the connecting one. I'd heard his voice through the wall earlier, a low murmur in Italian. At 7:30 sharp, his knock came. When she opened the door, he stood there, perfectly rested, the tension from the night before erased from his face. "Breakfast," he'd said, his voice leaving no room for discussion. I saw them downstairs later, in the half-empty restaurant. He chose a corner table, always watching the door, a habit I was starting to notice. They ordered a full breakfast, but I cleared away full plates of eggs and toast. He was all business, talking about 3 meetings, the first with developers at 9. The second, he said, was with the Castellano family lawyer. I saw her hand freeze, the coffee cup halfway to her lips. That name, Castellano, it hangs heavy in this city. It was Victor's cousin, I heard him say. A man named Paul. A different part of the family, with different loyalties. I saw Adrian put his phone down, his expression cold. "Paul despises Victor," he said, his voice low enough that I almost didn't catch it while refilling his water. He'd been wanting a way out for a long time, and Adrienne was giving it to him. A clean break, a fortune to make it easy. I polished the silverware at a nearby station, listening. In return, Paul would hand over everything on Victor's whole operation. Ledgers, fake companies, hidden accounts. I saw her absorb the words, her face pale. She said it wasn't business anymore, that it was war. I'll never forget his gaze when he met hers. Victor chose this. "What about the third meeting?" she asked. Something shifted in his eyes, a shadow that vanished as quickly as it appeared. "A personal thing," he told her. She didn't need to be there. I watched them finish their meal in a crushing silence. At 8:45, I saw the black SUV pull up, ready to take them into the heart of the city's towers, into the middle of his war. I saw that man, Paul Castellano, later. He wasn't like his cousin, not at all. Victor was a storm, all noise and fury, but Paul was quiet, watchful, a survivor. He was waiting in the lounge when they got back, and he stood up, shaking Adrienne's hand with the look of a man who knows he's about to get cut, but has to grab the blade anyway. "Thank you for seeing me," he said. Adrienne introduced her as his assistant, Lena Hayes. Paul's handshake was quick, but his eyes were kind. I brought them drinks. The small talk was so tense it felt like they were tap dancing through a minefield. Finally, Paul sat back. "You know what this is," he said. Adrienne's voice was flat, cold. "Your family stopped being family when Victor used them as human shields." "It wasn't a betrayal," he said. "It was self-preservation." I heard Paul mention Victor finding out. Adrienne promised he wouldn't, then slid a heavy folder across the polished table. A new life. New name. New money. It would all activate 24 hours after Paul delivered the files. I saw Paul's hands shake as he opened it. "This is real," he whispered. "I don't play games," Adrienne replied. "Why do this?" Paul asked, searching his face. I heard him ask why now, why this way. Adrian was silent for a long moment, then his voice dropped. Because he threatened something of mine. Paul's eyes darted to Lena just for a second, but I saw it. I saw the understanding dawn on his face. I see. He closed the folder. He needed 48 hours to get the files. Adrian gave him 72, and then the deal was off. Paul stood, tucking the folder away. He thanked them and walked out without a backward glance. I watched Lena wait until he was gone. He thinks we're together, she said. I saw her watch him, waiting. I know. She asked him why he didn't correct it. I saw his eyes lock on hers. Because the truth is more complicated. He called for the check, adding that sometimes letting people think what they want is a useful tool. They were back by 2. He vanished into his suite for that personal meeting, and I saw her left alone in the lobby, looking so small at the edge of his giant, dangerous world. At 5, I saw her phone light up. A text from him. Dinner at 7. Wear something nice. I watched her stare at the words, and the knot of guilt in my stomach tightened. She'd been set up for meetings, not for commands disguised as invitations. She had one good black dress, and she'd already worn it. Then her phone buzzed again. I saw her read the new text. Check the closet. I was doing the evening turn-down service, my cart silent in the hall, when I saw her open the walk-in. I saw them too. 3 pristine dress boxes from stores most people only dream of window shopping at. My heart ached for her. I watched her open the first box, revealing a silk dress the color of rich wine. The second held a gown of midnight blue. The third was a simple, stunning emerald green. A little card was tucked inside. Choose whichever you prefer. A. She just sat there for the longest time staring at those dresses. This was wrong. Bosses don't buy assistants' dresses that cost more than a month's rent. This wasn't professional. It was a brand. I wanted to knock, to say something, anything. But instead, I just watched as she lifted the green dress and held it up to her reflection in the mirror. It was perfect, and I think we both hated that fact. At 6:30, she showered and put on the dress. It fit her like a second skin. He must have had her measurements taken. The thought should have been terrifying. But I saw the look on her face, and it wasn't just fear. She left her hair down, put on makeup, and stepped into her heels. At 5 minutes to 7, she knocked on his door. When he opened it, any words she had ready just died. He was in a dark suit, looking like a king in his castle. I saw his eyes travel over her, a slow, possessive inventory. There was heat in his gaze, yes, but something else, something colder. Beautiful, was all he said. I heard her try to refuse the gift. You can, he said, stepping closer. Consider it part of the job. He told her some events required a certain look, and this was one. What kind of event? She asked. His smile was slow and full of shadows. The kind where appearances are everything. Later that night, while they were out at some exclusive place where money is the only thing on the menu, I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. I took a piece of hotel stationery and a pen from my pocket. My hand was shaking. I wrote just 4 words, a small truth in a web of lies. Paul is not safe. I slipped the note under her door, the hallway one, not his. It was a tiny act in a huge, dangerous game, a whisper. But I had finally said something, and I prayed it would be enough. I remember the first night I saw it happen, the shift. He leaned back and the air around their table crackled. He wasn't her boss anymore. I've served men like him my whole life. They live behind walls. He was asking to see behind hers. My hand paused while polishing a glass. I should have just kept working, but I heard her voice, thin but clear, admit she was terrified. Of what? He asked. And her answer hung in the air between them, of failing, of ending up like her mother in a tiny, water-stained apartment. Her fear was so real I could almost taste it. She confessed she was scared of being one step away from disaster, no matter what she did. And that's why she took his job. It wasn't just the money, though that helped. It was because he was a challenge, a man who frightened her because he was everything she was told to run from. Powerful, unapologetic. Then she said something that made me drop my cloth. That when he looked at her, she wasn't invisible anymore. After a lifetime of trying to be just that, I saw him absorb that, really see it. Then he offered a truth of his own. He told her he doesn't sleep, that his mind is a constant battlefield, cataloging every single threat. He was mapping out every weakness, every angle of attack. He admitted it was a draining way to live, but it was the only way he knew. I moved closer, pretending to check another table. What was he surviving? The weight of his family, the Moretti name, his father's empire, built on things people whisper about but never say aloud. When his father died, he got it all, the good, the bad, and the enemies. He'd spent a decade trying to wash it clean, to make it legitimate. But ghosts don't give up that easily. She asked if that's what this man, Victor, was. A ghost from the past. He said Victor was a reminder, a man who saw weakness now that his father was gone. And his voice went ice cold when he said the man was wrong. As I served the main course, perfectly grilled steak I'd served 100 times, the wall went back up. They retreated to safety, talking about art and books, piece by piece. But the crack was still there. I knew it. After, I saw them walk out into the glittering Chicago night. His hand rested on the small of her back, a gesture so casually possessive it made my stomach clench. It shouldn't have, but it did. I watched them stop on the bridge over the river. He had something to tell her. I saw her posture tighten. The night wasn't over. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the change in the air. He turned to her, his whole body angled in a way that was both protective and trapping. He was warning her. I could tell by the way her shoulders tensed. He would see how he watched her, he was saying without me hearing it. He'd see the dress, the dinner, his inability to stay away, and he would twist it into a weapon. She would ask who this man was. His name is Dmitry Vulov. I knew that name. We all did. A shark who ran the murky pharmaceutical trade on the coast, looking to partner on the Bellamy deal. The man was a nightmare, paranoid, brutal, and deadly. If he saw her as a weakness, he'd use it. So why bring her into it at all? Because hiding her would look worse, and because I could see it on his face even from a distance, because he couldn't stand the thought of her being out of his sight. He was talking about a war. Victor wouldn't quit. He would be hurt, but not broken. And when he struck back, anyone close to Adrienne would become a pawn. I saw her breath catch, the fear rippling through her, the idea that she could be a target. I watched his hand come up to her face, a tenderness there that was so at odds with the world he lived in. And he was admitting, right there over the river, that he cared for her more than he should. My own heart ached with a terrible foreboding. He knew it was madness. She worked for him. It was a terrible, awful idea for 1,000 reasons. But I could see it plain as day. He didn't care about a single one of them. He was telling her he wanted her. That he'd wanted her from the moment she treated him like a man, not a monster. His voice must have been a whisper then, telling her he would stop if she asked. But that if she didn't, he wouldn't. I watched her, willing her to step away, to save herself from the beautiful, gilded cage he was offering. For her own sake, for all the good reasons, she should have run. Instead, she rose up on her toes and kissed him. I saw him freeze for just a second. Then his hands were tangled in her hair, pulling her in, and the kiss was a firestorm. It was everything I feared for her. Possessive, dangerous, and intoxicating. He tasted of power and secrets, a story I'd seen play out too many times before. When they finally broke apart, the air between them was electric. His room, he must have said. Now. I saw the heat rise in her, and she just nodded. They moved like their lives depended on it. In the elevator, I caught a glimpse before the doors closed, his mouth on her neck, his hands holding her like she was the only solid thing in the world. The door to his suite had barely shut before he had her against it. He was kissing her as if he'd been starved of air. I saw her hands pushing his jacket from his shoulders. His hands found the zipper on her dress, lowering it with a torturous slowness. I imagined his question, whispered against her skin. "Tell me you want this." And her answer, "I want this." She pulled back to look him in the eyes. "I want you, Adrian. Just you." I could picture the armor around him shattering, the raw need underneath finally breaking free. He would have lifted her, her legs wrapping around his waist as he carried her to the bed. Her emerald dress, a splash of color on the floor. Then his clothes, until nothing was left between them but a desperate, consuming need, and the silent understanding that nothing would ever be the same. He'd start with a gentleness that would surprise her, his hands learning her body, every secret she held. But she would arch into him, her touch unleashing the beast he kept chained. And then it would be pure fire, a storm so powerful it would erase everything but the two of them in that room. Afterward, they would lie in the wreckage of it all, skin to skin, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder as their heartbeats slowed. "Are you okay?" he'd ask. And she would be. But then she'd wonder what they'd just done. He'd have no regrets, not him, but he'd admit it made things harder. And she'd say they already were. He'd stay quiet for a beat. Then he would have to tell her the truth about his world, the one behind the curtain, the real danger, where people get hurt, where people die. And now that she was his, that danger was hers too. "I'm not yours," she'd protest. But his arm would tighten around her, a silent claim. And she wouldn't fight it, not lying there, feeling protected for the first time, even as he told her she was in more danger than ever before. "What happens tomorrow?" would be her only question. "Tomorrow, we face Dmitri. We make him believe this is real. Isn't it?" And he'd hold her face, forcing her to see the truth in his eyes. He didn't know yet, but God help him, he wanted it to be. They wouldn't have slept, just touching, holding on as if a storm was about to break over them. The next morning, as I prepared the room service cart, I overheard one of Dimitri's security men mention a private car, waiting not at the front, but in the service alley out back. An escape route, an ambush. I saw Adrian by the window on his phone, already fighting his war. And as I passed her room, my hand shaking, I slipped a small, folded note under her door. It just had 2 words on it: Service Alley. It wasn't much, but it was something. The next morning when I picked them up, everything had changed. The space between them was gone, filled with a dangerous energy that was obvious even from the front seat. I overheard him on the phone, talking about letting some guy named Dmitri walk, his voice cold as ice. Then he turned to her, and his whole demeanor softened. He sat on the edge of the back seat like it was a bed, taking her hand. He told her she was his now. His. He said it like it was a promise, a comfort. I heard it for what it was, a life sentence. She was terrified, I could see it in her eyes, but she was drawn to him anyway. That's how he operates. He finds the one thing you want: safety, power, love, and twists it into a chain. They were going to a meeting, but they were running late. As I pulled into traffic, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw him smile at her, a wicked, private smile that made my stomach clench. I was their chauffeur, their confidant by proximity, and the deepest kind of coward. All I could think was, it's not too late. But I just kept my eyes on the road. I remember the day Lena Hayes started. She was sharp, professional, and had a wall around her you could feel from across the room. Then she went to Chicago with him, with Adrian Moretti. She came back. Different. Haunted. The first sign was when those men visited, the ones with dead eyes and suits that couldn't hide the bulk of their shoulders. Their leader had a smile that was all ice. I saw the way he looked at Lena, like she was a line item on a balance sheet he was about to acquire. That was the first day I felt the knot of fear in my stomach, not for me, but for her. It was the day I should have said something, anything, but I just kept my head down and pretended not to notice the shadows clinging to our boss. I watched him become her protector and her cage. When they came back, he was rarely more than 5 feet away from her. The air in the office crackled with their unspoken words. Everyone saw it, but no one said a thing. We all just watched the charade of professionalism. He'd be in a meeting, and his eyes would find her at her desk. She'd bring him coffee, and their hands would brush for a second too long. I'd see her staring out the window, looking trapped. I should have asked if she was okay. I should have done something. But I stayed silent, a coward in my cubicle, watching a woman I admired get pulled deeper into a world I couldn't comprehend. I just typed and answered phones, and the guilt ate at me every single day. That Monday felt like the beginning of the end. The tension was a physical thing, a storm gathering over our floor. Whispers about some rival, Victor Castellano, became more frequent. I saw the strain on Adrian's face, the darkness in his eyes. He was a predator, but now he was a hunted one, and he'd pulled Lena directly into the line of fire. She tried to maintain a professional front, all polite emails and organized schedules, but her hands trembled when she thought no one was looking. I saw. I always saw. I'd want to go over, offer a kind word, but then I'd catch Adrian's gaze from his glass-walled office, and the warning was clear. She was his, and what was his, he handled. My silence felt like a betrayal. The talk of a leak started, and the paranoia was suffocating. Adrian's trust in everyone evaporated overnight. He looked at us all with suspicion, his gaze lingering, trying to find the traitor. My stomach twisted every time he looked my way, even though I had done nothing. But I saw who had. I saw Marcus, always so friendly and harmless, making a hushed call in the stairwell, his face pale with sweat. I saw him glance at Lena's desk when he thought she wasn't there. He was the leak. The knowledge felt like a hot coal in my gut. I knew, and I knew telling anyone could get me fired, or worse. Fear kept my mouth shut while the woman down the hall was in the middle of a war she didn't start. I still remember that first morning, the one where my job went from protecting a CEO to guarding a secret. Mr. Moretti said I was to handle myself, but that it was Miss Hayes he worried about. He told her this world doesn't care about toughness, that it devours people whole. I watched his thumb brush her lip, heard him say he'd painted a target on her back just by caring for her. She told him to undo it, but he couldn't. It was already too late. Victor knew. Dmitri knew. Everyone who mattered knew she was his, which made her a pawn. I heard her pulse quicken from the hallway. He told her she needed real protection, not just me and Robert tailing her from a block away. His jaw was set like stone. Starting now, she wasn't to go anywhere by herself. A car to work, a car home, no subways, no walks in the park, no unsanctioned stops. She called it insane. He called it reality. He framed her face, his voice cracking with a fear I'd never heard from him before, saying he wouldn't lose her. Not her. That raw terror in his voice hit me too. This wasn't the cold boss I'd known for years. This was a man on the edge. She whispered, "Okay," and he kissed her like he was trying to leave a mark. When they finally separated, he rested his head against hers. "I have to find the leak," he said, his voice low. "And when I do, I have to make an example." I stood outside, my own guilt a heavy weight. I knew what that meant. The permanent kind. My stomach tightened. In our world, betrayal isn't met with a pink slip and a severance check. She asked if it had to be that way, and he said yes. Any weakness, any mercy shown now, would be an invitation for every predator out there to take a shot. He couldn't afford that, not with Victor and Dmitri circling. He told her this was the world he survived in, and I felt the cold truth in that. He stepped away from her then, and the space between them felt like a canyon. He said he wouldn't apologize for his world, but he'd shield her from it as long as he could. A knock on the door made me straighten up as his professional mask slid back into place. Marcus came in, all business about the Bellamy acquisition. Papers, press conferences, the switch was instant. The vulnerable man was gone. Paul Castellano had called about some files. Mr. Moretti's eyes flickered to her for just a second. He said he'd handle it himself that night somewhere public. Marcus left, the door clicking shut. Mr. Moretti turned back to her, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. She was to stay late, right there, in his office, with me standing guard outside. He couldn't risk Victor making a play while he was occupied. She fought back, said she wasn't some damsel needing to be locked away. He replied, "No, you're a weakness I can't afford to expose." The words hung in the air as he grabbed his jacket. He paused at the door, acknowledging this wasn't what she signed up for. She said she was still here, and for a moment, I saw his expression soften. Then he was gone, and I was left to stand watch, feeling more like a jailer than a bodyguard. The hours dragged on. The floor emptied out, the cleaners came and went. By 8, it was just us, the silence broken only by the building's hum. A text came through. He was on his way back. I heard her order food, trying to find some normalcy in all this madness. She was eating at his desk when her phone rang. An unknown number. I saw her hesitate, then answer. I couldn't hear the voice, but I saw the change in her. Her blood ran cold. The caller knew she was alone, knew what she was eating. I saw her glance at the window, suddenly realizing she was a target in a glass box 43 floors up. I tensed, ready to move, but she just stood there, listening. The conversation went on, and I watched her brave facade crumble. This was Victor's move, a psychological attack I was powerless to stop. The call was a poison dart, and all I could do was watch it hit its mark. From my position, she was just a pawn being threatened, trapped on a board by a man who was very good at this game. He told her Adrian would sacrifice her when it suited him. He questioned why she was hired in the first place, a girl with no connections. I saw her throat tighten. He offered her a way out, safety, a future. She was about to hang up, but his last words froze her in place. He told her to ask Adrian about Chicago, about someone named Elena. The line went dead. She just sat there, phone to her ear, heart pounding. Elena. Who was Elena? Just then, the elevator chimed. I opened the door for Mr. Moretti, and he walked in to find her looking terrified. He knew instantly. Victor called me, she said. Mr. Moretti became unnervingly still. He asked what was said. She told him about the threats, the warnings. Then she set her phone down and asked, "Who's Elena?" The name hit him like a punch. I saw the composure he'd spent years building shatter for a split second. "Where did you hear that name?" he demanded. She told him Victor had mentioned it. She stood her ground, waiting for an answer. "So I'm asking," she repeated. After a long, heavy silence, he told her to close the door. I heard his voice, low and controlled, as he explained. Elena was his fiancée 4 years ago. She died in a car accident, a hit and run. The police ruled it random, but he never believed it. He was sure it was a message, a warning that they could take anyone he loved. He turned to face her, and though I couldn't see him, I could feel the cold certainty in his voice. He knew Victor was behind it. He couldn't prove it, but he knew. And he knew Victor was trying to do the same thing to her now. He confessed that he should let her go, send her far away from this war. But he couldn't. He was too selfish. I heard her quiet, defiant reply, "I'm not going anywhere." In that moment, watching her choose to stay in the line of fire, my own inaction felt like a sin. When Mr. Moretti finally left her alone in the office, I took a small notepad from my pocket. I wrote down the license plate of the car I'd seen idling outside Paul Castellano's building earlier, a car belonging to one of Dimitri's men. I slipped the note under the door. It wasn't much, but it was no longer silence. I didn't know the details of Adrian's past, but you could feel the violence in his history. You could see it in the way he held himself, in the way he looked at Lena, a mix of fierce possession and sheer terror. He was a monster, I was sure of it, but he was a monster trying to protect her. And she wasn't just some damsel. I saw her spine turn to steel. She met his darkness not with fear, but with a strength that stunned me. She was choosing to stand in the storm with him. Who was I to interfere? But then I'd remember the look on her face that first week, hopeful, determined, and I knew the silent witness in me had to do more than just watch her be consumed by his world. I couldn't live with the silence anymore. I couldn't be the person who just watched it happen. That night, after everyone had gone, I sat in the empty office, the glow of my monitor the only light. My hands shook as I opened an anonymous email account. I thought about the risk, about Adrian, about Marcus, about losing everything. But then I thought about Lena, about her quiet bravery, and the fear turned into resolve. I typed a single simple line. The leak is closer than you think. Watch Marcus. I hit send, my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't much. It was a whisper in a hurricane. But it wasn't silence. And for the first time in months, as I walked out into the city night, I felt a glimmer of hope. Victor's phone call changed everything. When I picked them up that evening, the tension was back. But it was different. It was sharp, lethal. He was promising her a normal life, a future, while his hands were still dirty from the war he was waging. He was taking her from her apartment, talking about security, about a doorman on his phone. He was taking her to his place, his fortress in Tribeca. He was isolating her. I followed them down to the parking garage, my footsteps echoing behind his bodyguard, James. He guided her toward a black sedan, not the usual car, a ghost car. His hand never left her back. The whole ride, I felt her fear radiating from the back seat. It was no longer a game. This was real. He had her. As I pulled up to the glass and steel tower he called home, I knew my silence had run its course. It had become a debt I couldn't pay. After I dropped them, I drove a few blocks away and parked. I pulled out a cheap burner phone from the glove box. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. I remembered a name he'd mentioned on the phone, a detail about Bellamy Pharmaceuticals he'd let slip. I dialed the number for a journalist I knew, a guy who didn't scare easy. When he answered, I didn't give my name. I just started talking. I remember the first time he brought her to the penthouse. He told her to get comfortable, then walked into his office to make the calls that would tighten the net around her life. I watched her from the hall, a ghost in my own line of work. She moved through the rooms, her awe mixed with a kind of unease. She saw the terrace, the sterile kitchen, the lonely master bedroom. A place designed for solitude, not sharing. I saw it too, but I also remembered Elena. I remembered how this same luxury became her cage. When he leaned in the doorway, offering her his bed, I felt a cold dread. This time, there wasn't the frantic energy I'd seen before. It was a slow, deliberate claiming, a quiet sealing of her fate. As they disappeared into the room, I stood my post, feeling the weight of history repeating itself. He was memorizing her, yes, but he was also forging a new link in a chain of grief. He spoke of Elena later, and I heard the same raw pain I'd heard in the lonely years after her death. She was good, he said, too good for him. A volunteer, a believer in the best of people. That belief got her killed. I was there the day he found out. The rage, the helplessness. He tried to build walls, to keep his two worlds from touching, but men like Victor always find the seams. He found Elena, the one pure thing in Adrian's life, and snuffed her out. Now, with Lena wrapped in his arms, he was swearing not to make that mistake again. The mistake, he said, was thinking he could keep her separate. That was the moment my gut twisted. He was going to pull her in. He was going to show her everything. The meeting with the family was the first step. The old guard, The men who saw his father's legacy as scripture. Men who traded in loyalty and blood. He said he needed their backing against Victor, but he also needed them to see her, to understand she was under his protection. That's what he called it, protection. I called it a brand, a mark that made her a target. He said it would be terrifying, and he wasn't wrong. These weren't men who signed contracts. They wrote them in scars. They would die for her, he promised. But what part of her would have to die first for them to accept her? If they didn't accept her, he'd make them. That was the Moretti way. The name was a hammer, and he was ready to swing it. Sleep didn't come for me either that night. I was a sentry for his past and his future, watching one bleed into the other. She thought she was chosen. I thought she was sentenced. By morning, the shift was complete. He was on the phone. The fluid Italian masking commands I knew were ironclad. He told her there were clothes, that he'd had them sent over. He told her to wear something that made her look like she belonged with him. Expensive. Untouchable. It was a costume for a role she didn't know she was auditioning for. In the guest room, she found an arsenal of designer labels. She chose a pantsuit the color of a storm cloud and a blouse like dried blood. With her hair pulled back and her makeup sharp, she looked in the mirror, and I saw her face settle into a mask. She didn't look like the woman who'd wandered the apartment last night. She looked like a queen preparing for war. We drove to Brooklyn, the city a blur outside the armored glass. Robert and I were bookends to their charged silence. The restaurant was a relic, a place where oaths had been sworn for generations. 7 men stood when he walked in. 7 old wolves, their eyes missing nothing. The air was thick with judgment. He introduced her simply. Lena Hayes. The oldest of them, Sal Russo, a man whose face was a roadmap of violent history, stepped up. I knew his father, he said. It was a test, a reminder of lineage. She met his gaze, shook his hand, and didn't break. For 3 hours they talked. It was a chess match of words. Adrian laid out his war plans, and they poked and prodded, searching for any hint of weakness. And she sat there, a silent statue beside him, but her presence was a statement. I watched them watch her. I saw their calculations, their silent debate. Was she a vulnerability or a weapon? And then, somewhere between the appetizer and the main course, I saw the tide turn. They weren't just accepting her, they were claiming her too. The tension broke. You've chosen well, Sal told him, looking right at her. She has steel. Adrian knew it, but he also knew steel could shatter. Victor won't play fair, Sal warned. Of course he wouldn't. He'd aim right for her. Let him, Adrian said, his hand finding hers beneath the table. The meeting ended with clasped hands and sworn allegiance. Driving back, the air was different, lighter, but more dangerous. You did well, he told her. I didn't do anything, she replied. And that was the point. Her stillness had been her strength. He told her the word would be out by nightfall, that everyone would know she was his, and that Victor would move soon. The pieces were all on the board. The war was no longer a threat, it was a promise. We had 48 hours of peace. Then came the gala, the Metropolitan Museum, 500 of the city's elite pretending to care about charity. It was the perfect stage, a public declaration. It was visibility, power, and a direct challenge to his enemies. I saw her in the penthouse mirror, wrapped in a midnight blue gown that was both elegant and armor. She looked like she belonged there, and the thought was making her sick. I could see it. You're thinking too loud, he said, appearing in the doorway, a figure of impossible calm in his tuxedo. She admitted she was thinking of Victor, of what this public display would trigger. He already knows, Adrian told her, as he fastened a river of diamonds around her neck. This makes it official. It was a leash, no matter how beautiful. He said he wasn't afraid. A lie. I saw the terror in him, coiled tight beneath the surface. The necklace was cold against her skin. Armor, he called it, for a room full of predators. I'm not untouchable, she whispered. And he knew it. As they prepared to leave, as I held the door open for them, our eyes met for a fraction of a second. The protocol was to be invisible, a shadow. But I broke it. I gave a small, sharp nod, just for her. "Stay close tonight, ma'am," I said, my voice low. "We've got you." It wasn't much, but it was the only truth I had to give, a promise from one prisoner to another. It started the day he told her about Victor. I saw his face in the rearview mirror, all sharp angles and worry. He warned her to be careful, to stick close to him at the gala. He told her to stay in the light. I'd heard him give warnings like that before, years ago. I thought Victor wouldn't dare do something in a crowded room, but Mr. Moretti knew better. Desperation makes a man a cornered animal. The news about Paul's financials had broken that morning, and the sharks were circling. Victor's world was catching fire, and he was the type to drag everyone down with him. Mr. Moretti admitted he was the one who lit the match, his smile like ice. He said Victor asked for a fight, and this was it. I dropped them at the entrance to the gala, a palace of shimmering lights and quiet lies. She looked beautiful on his arm, but all I could see was a target. Every head that turned, every whisper I imagined, felt like a threat. Mr. Moretti never brought anyone to these things, not since before. He'd built a fortress around himself, and tonight, he'd just opened the gate for her. He murmured something to her and she smiled, but I could see the tension in her shoulders as he led her into the lion's den. I waited with the car, watching the stream of guests. Business partners, old money, new climbers, I've seen them all. Mr. Moretti could handle them, navigate their false smiles and hidden knives with an ease that always unsettled me. His hand, I knew, would be resting on her back, a silent promise of protection I wasn't sure he could keep. Then I saw them through the glass doors, stopped by a woman in a blood-red dress. Vivian Chen. I knew that name, and the jagged smile that went with it. Her eyes raked over Lena, sharp and hungry. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the scene. A challenge, an old flame trying to start a new fire. When they finally came back out, the air in the car was thick with it. Mr. Moretti looked grim. "Sorry about that," he said, his voice low. "Vivian and I have a past." Lena asked what kind. "The forgettable kind," he answered, but his grip on the steering wheel told me it was anything but. "A few dates years ago," he'd said. I knew that wasn't the whole story, just like I knew this night was about more than just a party. It was a test. It all started the moment I saw him walking toward her. I was standing my post near the ballroom entrance, watching Adrian and Lena work the room, a perfect power couple. He left her at the table, just for a moment, and I remember thinking she looked so alone in that sea of sharks. My job is to watch, to anticipate threats, but my blood ran cold when I saw which shark was circling. I knew I should have done something, anything to intervene. Instead, I just stood there, a silent coward in a tuxedo, counting the seconds. I watched him approach her, his smile all wrong, and felt a profound sense of dread settle in my gut. It was my duty to protect them, but in that moment, paralyzed by protocol, I failed. At exactly the 12-minute mark, the predator sat down with his prey, and all I could do was watch the poison being served. I couldn't hear the words, not all of them, but I didn't need to. I saw the calculated cruelty in his posture, the way Lena's spine stiffened. Every instinct I had screamed that this was an attack, as dangerous as any physical assault. My hand hovered over my comms unit, my thumb tracing the button that would bring Adrian back in an instant. But I held back, telling myself it wasn't my place, that she could handle it. The regret was immediate and sharp. This was weakness, my weakness, letting this venom seep into her mind unchallenged. He was trying to break her, and by extension, break Adrian. And I was letting him. I knew the story he was likely telling, the lies he would twist into weapons. Her name was Maria. I knew the truth of that disaster, and the thought of him using it against her made me sick with a guilt I couldn't swallow. When he finally pushed his chair back and walked away, it was my chance to undo some of the damage my inaction had caused. I moved before I could second-guess myself again, sliding into the seat he'd left warm. The fear and confusion in her eyes was a knife to the chest. I saw Victor talking to you, I started, the words feeling clumsy. I had to set it right. I told her about the 6 years I'd spent by Adrian's side, about the ruthless man who also carried the weight of the world, a man who was nothing like the monster Victor painted. I explained what really happened to Maria, about the theft, the escape. I was desperate for her to see the truth, to understand that she was being manipulated. I was trying to fix what I should have prevented. Adrian came back then, and the shift in his eyes as he looked at her told me everything. I faded back, my part in this small drama over for now. But it wasn't over. Later, in the lobby, I heard Victor's voice cut through the air, sharp and deliberate. I watched Adrian place himself between Lena and the threat, a human shield. The whole world seemed to stop and watch. Victor's words were poison darts, aimed at old wounds I knew Adrian thought were long healed. He brought up his father. Then he brought up Elena. It was a calculated move, designed to provoke the one reaction that would prove Victor's point. That underneath the suit, Adrian was just another savage. He moved so fast. For a split second, as his hand fisted in Victor's collar, I thought Victor had won. The collective gasp of the crowd was deafening. This was it, the moment that would define him, the moment everyone would remember. But then, I saw the control lock back into place. He held all that power, all that rage, and he contained it. His words, not his fists, were the real weapon. He promised not a quick end, but a slow, methodical erasure. He promised to make Victor irrelevant. It was terrifying, but it wasn't his father's violence. It was something else entirely, something colder and far more absolute. He wouldn't just defeat his enemy, he would unmake him. In the car, I know they were dissecting the fallout. But I was still in the lobby, watching the hyenas gather. I saw a writer from a notorious gossip rag typing furiously, a vulture smelling blood. She'd frame it as an unhinged outburst, confirming every rumor about the Moretti temper. And I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. I walked over to her, keeping my tone casual. "Quite a scene," I said. "Pity you missed what started it." Castellano was verbally attacking Ms. Hayes. Adrian just stepped in to protect her. It was a small thing, just one sentence, a risk. But as I saw her stop typing, a flicker of consideration on her face, I felt the weight in my chest lighten. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. It was my voice, finally used. His voice cracked as he spoke, the words meant for her but echoing in the small space where I sat, invisible. He asked if she saw him as anything but broken. He called himself a man who had loved 2 women and lost one to the grave. He feared he was leading the second to the same fate because he couldn't let her go. She told him to stop. He confessed the truth about Maria, that she had worked for him, that he'd trusted her, and that the world he'd brought her into had terrified her into running. His hands tightened into fists on his lap. He saw the pattern, the one Victor had pointed out. The people he cared for vanished or died. And now, she was standing in that same spot. I pulled up to the building, opening the door for them, my movements automatic. But she didn't move. She told him she wasn't Maria, and she wasn't Elena. She wouldn't run. She begged him to stop treating her as if she would shatter. He said she was flesh and bone, exactly what Victor wanted to crush to hurt him. "Let him try," she'd answered, her voice fierce. She told him the only thing she feared was him pushing her away. She kissed him then, a quiet command to stop saving her from himself. I closed the door as they got on the elevator, the silence in the car heavier than any words. The weight of that night settled on me long after I drove away. I could still hear him talking about Elena, the city lights blurring through my windshield. He told Lena the real story. He'd met her at a charity event. She was raising money for a children's hospital, and her goodness was so pure it stunned him. He said he gave $500,000 just to see her smile again. He described her as painfully kind, a woman who saw the best in him when he couldn't see it himself. They were together for a year before he asked her to be his wife, all while trying to build a wall between her and the darkness of his world. But evil finds a way in. A trusted person in his own circle had sold her out to Victor. I remember the call like it was yesterday. 3 days before their wedding, a hit and run on the FDR. No driver, no car, just another tragic accident according to the police. But we knew. He knew. He waited 4 years, not for revenge, but for justice. That night, driving home, I realized I couldn't just be a witness anymore. I pulled a worn notebook from my glove box, one where I jotted down license plates and odd details. I found an entry from 6 months ago, a car I saw parked near Victor's office twice. I wrote it down on a piece of paper, sealed it in an envelope, and dropped it into a public mailbox. No name, no return address. Just a small truth sent out into the world, hoping it would be enough to protect this one. I still remember the first day she walked in. We were all holding our breath, waiting for Adrian to finally move against Victor, to use the evidence we'd gathered. Then she appeared, a quiet storm in our world of quiet violence, and fixed his tie. In that moment, the air in the office shifted. The grim focus on revenge suddenly seemed hollow. It was because of her. She showed him there was something else to want. I saw his hand touch her face, a tenderness none of us thought he possessed. We all knew the stories about his father, the whispers of what he was capable of. She made him want to be more than that legacy. A builder, not a destroyer. I heard her whisper, "Choose us." And it was a choice for all of us, a chance at something better than the hate we were drowning in. He kissed her like a man starved of air. I looked away, we all did, giving them the illusion of privacy as they found something real against the glass, with the whole city as their witness. Later, I'd see them together, quiet and close. I knew about the scar on his ribs. We all did. It was a story told in hushed tones, a reminder of the man who'd raised him, a lesson taught with a belt buckle when Adrian was just 17. He tried to brush it off as ancient history, but we could all see the shadow it cast, the constant fear that he was just a different version of the same monster. She told him he was nothing like his father. And for the first time, it felt like he might actually believe it. But believing was hard in our line of work. Victor was a ghost from his father's past, always there to remind him of the rot he came from, making him wonder if all the legitimate fronts were just hiding the same darkness. But Lena saw through it. She saw the man who gave guys like Paul Castellano a second chance, the man who saved companies instead of tearing them apart for profit. She didn't see him through rose-colored glasses. She saw the man fighting to be good in a world that demanded he be bad. She knew he would win, not by being more vicious, but by being smarter, by playing a long game that would leave him standing with his soul intact. I remember the afternoon he got the intel. The tension ratcheted up so high you could taste it. Victor was planning his big move for Friday, calling in every favor. We all knew it had to be the Bellamy press conference. It was the perfect stage for chaos, for a public statement written in blood. Adrian's face was stone. He was ready for a war. He told her to stay safe, to trust him. I saw the look in her eyes. She wanted to fight alongside him. But she understood. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust someone else to protect you, to let them be the shield. Back. I saw her that first day, a ghost in the lobby, and I should have known then. He looked at her like a predator, and she just looked desperate. For 3 days, I watched him turn the office into a war room. Lawyers, security, PR guys, all of them his soldiers. He was a general moving pieces on a board, and she was the queen he was supposedly protecting. But it felt more like he was trapping her. It should have scared her, seeing him become that cold, but from my desk, I saw the way she looked at him. Adoration. It made my stomach turn. He was a monster, plain and simple, and she was falling for him. Thursday night, I was working late when he came in. I heard them talking from the conference room. His voice was low, tired. He told her to promise she'd run, to just disappear if things went bad. It was all the proof I needed. He knew this was a suicide mission, and he was ready to let her take the fall. I did nothing. I just sat there, listening to him make her promise to save herself because he couldn't bear to lose her. And the whole time, I knew he was the reason she was in danger in the first place. I hated myself for it. I saw them early the next morning. They looked like they hadn't slept, clinging to each other by the elevators as if the world was about to end. Maybe it was. He was asking her to trust him, but all I could see was a man dragging her into a war she never signed up for. The guilt was a physical weight, crushing me. I wanted to tell her to get out, to run far away from him and never look back. But I just lowered my eyes and pretended to check my phone. Her promise echoed in my head. I heard him pull it out of her, the promise to leave him behind. He held her so tight, whispering things I couldn't make out. But I could see the tears in her eyes, and the fear in his. He told her he loved her. I almost choked. Love? He barely knew her. All he knew was how to own things, and now he was branding her with words, trapping her before the final battle. She said it back. Of course she did. They were two broken people clinging to each other in a storm he created. And I just watched. The city was waking up, but it felt like we were all holding our breath. I knew what was coming. It was war, and she was standing right on the front lines. 3 weeks. That's how long it had been since she first walked in here, lost and invisible. In just 3 weeks, he had remade her into someone who belonged in his world of glass and steel. I saw him find her in his office before it all started, his hands on her shoulders. He was offering her an out, a chance to hide upstairs. A small part of me hoped she'd take it. "We face it together," she said, her voice clear in the quiet office. And just like that, my hope died. He was all cold confidence, talking about security and contingency plans. Sal's guys at the exits, security tripled. He was so sure he could protect her, but all I could see were the cracks in his fortress. He expected Victor to show up, welcomed it even. He saw it as a game, another move on the chessboard. He talked about staying 3 steps ahead, about how desperation makes people sloppy. He was turning her to face him, his words a poison I couldn't stop. He was ready for a mistake, he said. He was ready to capitalize on it. Then Marcus knocked, and I was the one who had to open the door. My face was a mask, hiding the panic I felt. The press was here. The battle was about to begin. I saw investors in the front, the board right behind them. Marcus told him Lena's seat was next to his, visible, a trophy. Adrian nodded, all business. I saw him ask about Victor. Marcus said his people were in the lobby, making a scene. All I could think was that they were already inside the wire. They were contained, he said, but the noise was a distraction, a classic tactic. Adrian didn't care. Let them make noise, he said, as if they were nothing. 15 minutes. He gave the order like a king. The conference room was a circus. Cameras everywhere, reporters packed in like sardines. The whole setup was designed to project power. I watched Lena walk to her seat, the whole room tracking her. She wore a gray suit and that diamond necklace he gave her, a beautiful collar on a beautiful prize. She looked like she belonged there. That was the most heartbreaking part. Adrian took the podium, and a hush fell over the room. He didn't even have to speak, his presence was enough. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice booming with a false sincerity that made my skin crawl. He announced the acquisition of Bellamy Pharmaceuticals. The cameras flashed like lightning before a storm. The reporters were eating out of his hand. He talked about growth and innovation, about saving lives. He sounded like a hero, a captain of industry. I felt sick. He was painting himself as a reformer, the man cleaning up a corrupt world he was already a king in. His words were a smokescreen. He mentioned working with federal investigators, and the room buzzed. The sharks could smell blood. He talked about shell companies and money laundering, carefully laying out every crime without naming the criminal. He was dismantling Victor's entire life's work in front of a live audience. "Are you referring to Victor Castellano?" some reporter finally yelled. Adrian didn't even flinch. He just talked about operating within the law, his expression unreadable. He was condemning a man to ruin, and it was just another business deal to him. Another competitor to be crushed. He made it clear that Castellano's methods were over. The questions came flying, but he handled them all. He was brilliant, I'll give him that. A master manipulator. He was destroying Victor without leaving a single fingerprint. I watched Lena's face. She looked mesmerized, terrified, proud. How could she not see the monster standing in front of her? And then, the alarm. The shriek of the fire alarm tore through the room. Pure chaos. People were on their feet, shouting, confused. My eyes shot to Adrian, then to Lena. He was scanning the room, his mind already working, trying to figure out if it was a threat or a drill. He was telling people to stay calm, to exit in an orderly fashion. My security training kicked in, and I started moving toward the doors, directing people. But I was watching them. That's when I saw it. It wasn't one of the main security guys, but one of the caterers hired for the event. A man I didn't recognize. Amid the panic, he wasn't moving toward an exit. He was moving toward her, his hand reaching inside his jacket. Everyone was running away, he was closing in. Adrian saw him too, but he was too far away. Security was focused on the crowd. It was happening. For weeks I had done nothing. I had stood by and watched this unfold. Not anymore. I didn't shout, I didn't draw a weapon. I just changed my path, stumbling right into the man's way, and sent a tray of hot coffee flying all over his front. He swore, staggering back, his cover blown. Security was on him in a second. I just stood there, shaking, covered in coffee, finally having done something. I still remember the exact shade of dread that washed over the room. The first sign of trouble was the shriek of the fire alarm, sending a wave of confusion through the crowd. I saw Marcus trying to steer Lena toward a side exit, a small moment of hope in the growing chaos. But that hope vanished the second the door burst inward. It was Victor Castellano, flanked by 3 men whose faces were pure ice. The entire ballroom fell silent, the alarm fading to a dull buzz in my ears. Victor's smile was a slash of malice as he called out to Adrian. From my place in the audience, I saw Adrian step down from the podium, a shield between the woman he loved and the monster from his past. I wanted to scream, to do something, but my feet were cemented to the floor. Then Victor held up that manila folder like a weapon. He spoke of betrayal and illegal dealings, and I watched Adrian's face, hoping for denial, for righteous anger. Instead, I saw a chilling resolve settle over him, and a piece of my hope fractured. He admitted to the payments, and my stomach plummeted. Adrian's voice was cold as steel when he called them consulting fees. But Victor just sneered. He stalked closer, his words like venom, calling Adrian a monster just like his father, only better dressed. For a terrifying moment, I thought he was right. Then Adrian spoke of federal agents, of a warrant, and a wave of relief washed over me. He had a plan. He was in control. But Victor's laughter echoed in the silent room, a sound I'll never forget. He wasn't trapped. He was the one holding the trap. He nodded, and one of his men moved toward Lena. I saw Marcus try to intervene, but he was instantly blocked. They were too far. Everyone was too far away. The man grabbed Lena, and a collective gasp filled the air. I just stood there, frozen in horror. Then I saw the gun in Victor's hand, appearing so casually it was sickening. The room finally broke, screams erupting all around me. He laid out his terms, his eyes fixed on Adrian, using Lena as his bargaining chip. He knew, we all knew, that she was Adrian's whole world. And I was just a witness, shrouded in my own cowardice. It all started with the flash of a gun. I remember the weight of the camera on my shoulder, how it felt like the only solid thing in a room that had just dissolved into chaos. I was just a kid, a freelance videographer who'd talked my way into a major press conference. One minute, I was getting pristine shots of Adrian Moretti, corporate titan. The next, his rival Victor had a gun to a woman's head, and my camera was still rolling, capturing it all. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. I just watched through the lens as Adrian stared down the barrel. his voice a low, steady thing in the screaming silence. Part of me, the reporter part, knew this was the shot of a lifetime. But the human part, the part that was shrinking inside my chest, felt the cold dread in that room. I saw Adrian take a step, his words slicing through the tension, dismantling Victor piece by piece. My hands were shaking, but the camera was steady. I was a witness, a recorder of history, and utterly, shamefully useless. I just kept filming as he called Victor's bluff, that terrible cold smile on his face as he said the gun wasn't loaded. In that 1 second of doubt on Victor's face, my world tilted. James and Robert moved, a blur of controlled violence. I swung the camera, catching Adrian closing the distance, his hand a vice on the gun. The sound of bone cracking was sickeningly clear on my audio feed. Then the punch, brutal and final. Victor crumpled. I watched Adrian stand over him, a predator who'd won, and I felt a profound sense of guilt. All I did was watch. His words were quiet, but my boom mic picked them up perfectly. I am my father's son. It was a confession and a condemnation all at once. I saw him crouch, saw the promise of a different kind of destruction in his eyes, not with a bullet, but with the law. Then the doors exploded inward, and federal agents swarmed the room. My lens was filled with tactical gear, shouting, and the methodical process of arrest. It was a scene from a movie, but the scent of fear and sweat was real. An agent spoke to Adrian, and for a moment, I thought it was over. But then Adrian's eyes scanned the room, landing on Lena. I watched him cross to her, the chaos parting as if by magic. He wrapped her in his arms, and even from across the room, I could see the terror finally leaving her body. I zoomed in, capturing the raw intimacy of the moment, and felt like a voyeur. He asked her if she was okay, if she knew the gun was a bluff. Her hand on his face was a small anchor in the storm. "It's over," she whispered. And I kept filming, documenting their private victory while my own shame churned inside me. The hours that followed were a blur of FBI statements and my own interviews with the network, my footage leading every news cycle. My footage made me a name overnight, but it felt like a tainted victory. Every time I saw the clip of Victor's downfall, of Adrian's cold fury, I was reminded of my own inaction. I tracked the story obsessively. Adrian's acquisition of Bellamy went through without a hitch. The press conference, my press conference, had cemented his power. I watched news reports detailing Victor Castellanos' arrest for a laundry list of felonies. His empire was being systematically torn apart, his assets frozen. They said the investigation would take years, but everyone knew the truth. Victor was done for. The world saw Adrian as a hero, a ruthless but brilliant man who'd cleaned up his world. All I could see was the man standing over his fallen enemy, and the woman who had almost paid the price. I thought about them in that penthouse I'd only seen in magazines, wondered if they felt the relief I saw on the news, or if the ghosts of that day still haunted them. My guilt was a constant companion, a silent hum beneath the noise of my newfound success. I started digging deeper, not for a story, but for something else. Understanding, maybe. I read about Lena's promotion to Director of Strategic Operations. I saw pictures of them at charity galas, looking every bit the power couple. They were building something from the ashes of that day, something real. He was saving her, and she was saving him right back. They were two people who had faced the abyss and were now making something whole, and I was the one who had only recorded their pain. I felt like I hadn't earned the right to watch their triumph. My honor felt compromised. I had profited from their trauma, built a career on the worst day of their lives. While they were building a new world, I was stuck replaying the old one, frame by frozen frame, wondering if I could have done more than just point and shoot. The feeling of being an observer, a ghost at the feast, was eating me alive. Then I found it. In the hours of raw footage, there was a moment everyone else missed. As the FBI agents were cuffing Victor's men, one of them looked directly at Lena. His lips barely moved, but my zoom lens caught the words clearly. This isn't over. It was a whisper, a promise of future violence lost in the roar of the raid. I had sat on this clip for months. My producer would kill for it, a new angle, a lingering threat, a way to keep the story alive. But all I could think about was them. They were finally building a life, something peaceful. Releasing this would shatter it, paint a target on their backs all over again. Was my career worth their safety? Was I a journalist first, or a human being? For weeks, I did nothing. The tiny clip a bomb sitting on my hard drive. It was my secret, my burden, and my one chance to do something more than just watch. It was a promise of my own. Yesterday, I made a choice. I isolated the clip. Just those 3 seconds of footage. No logos, no time codes. I put it on a clean thumb drive. On a plain piece of paper, I typed a single sentence. From the press conference, watch your backs. I put both in a padded envelope, addressed it to Adrian Moretti, care of Moretti Capital, and paid a courier in cash to deliver it, no return address. They would never know it was from me, the silent cameraman in the corner. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was me, finally, stepping out from behind the lens. As the courier walked away, I felt the weight on my shoulders lift, just a little. Let them talk, let them say she slept her way to the top. I knew the truth. I had watched her face down death. I had watched him tear down an empire for her. And now, in my own small way, I was helping them build their future, proving that sometimes even a silent witness can find their voice. For months after that day, a shadow hung over the office. But through it, I watched Lena rise. She wasn't just standing beside Adrian. She was his partner, rebuilding the company's soul one brilliant deal at a time. She transformed Bellamy's, ensuring life-saving drugs reached people who needed them, silencing every single person who ever questioned her place. About 6 months after the incident, the news spread like wildfire. He had taken her back to Chicago, to the very restaurant where their story truly began. I wasn't there, but I heard he got down on one knee right in the middle of dinner. I imagined the whole place falling quiet, the two of them in their own world, him looking at her as if she held all the answers. I felt a surge of pure joy for them, a distant but profound happiness. They had stared into the abyss and walked away, choosing to build something beautiful together. From the sidelines, I watched them earn every moment of peace that came next, and it gave me a sliver of hope. Their wedding was exactly what they needed, a quiet ceremony overlooking the ocean, far from the city's glare. I saw a picture later. It was intimate, shared only with the people who had stood by them. Marcus was his best man, and I heard he gave a speech about how Lena was the only person who'd ever made the boss genuinely smile. They spent 2 weeks in Greece, completely unplugged, just a husband and wife learning to be, without the weight of their world pressing in. Soon after they returned, that article was published, calling Adrian one of the city's most influential business leaders. It was a testament to his work, to the good he was creating. The piece mentioned his father only once, a ghost of a legacy that his son had completely redefined. I knew Lena would have framed that article. It wasn't just about his victory, it was theirs. And from my desk, I felt a quiet pride for the people they had become. A year later, the news of Lena's pregnancy brought a new light to the office. I can only imagine the conversations they must have had, the fear and hope tangled together. But the day their daughter was born, all that fear seemed to vanish. I saw a photo of Adrian holding her, his tough exterior gone, just a father overwhelmed by love. They named her Sophia Elena, a tribute to the kindness he'd known and the loss that had changed him. Holding his daughter, he wasn't the ruthless CEO anymore. He was a man promising a future he never had. 2 years after that, he made it official. He sold the last remnants of his father's corrupt empire and donated every penny to help victims of organized crime. He stood before the cameras, Lena at his side, and declared the Moretti name would now stand for something better. It was the end of an era, and I was privileged to have witnessed it. The Moretti Foundation launched the following year, a project born from their shared belief in second chances. It was designed to help kids from tough backgrounds, offering them the support Adrian never had. Lena took the helm, her passion transforming countless lives. On Sophia's 5th birthday, they threw a party in Central Park. It was a beautiful sunny day filled with friends and laughter, the family they had built. As I watched Sophia play, the sun setting behind the city skyline, my phone buzzed. It was a journalist, writing a story on the foundation, his tone laced with skepticism about their past. He asked if the change was real. In that moment, I remembered my silence at the press conference, the regret that still lingered. This time, I wouldn't just stand by. I watched them rebuild an empire on integrity, I said, my voice clear and strong. They are more than their past. They are the proof that people can choose to be better. It was just a small act, a few words, but for me it was everything. It was my turn to speak the truth for them. That day, as things got heated, I saw him kiss her temple. It was a quiet moment of peace before the storm. He told her she was right, that they had built something good from all the broken pieces of their lives, something extraordinary. He told her he loved her, that he'd loved her through every version of herself, and would love her forever. It was a promise whispered against the roar of the coming battle. And as they held each other, with the city lights starting to twinkle, I knew I couldn't just stand by anymore. The weight of my silence, of my complicity in this world, felt like a stone in my gut. I had spent my life staying small, just like she used to. But watching her had changed me too. Later, I was passing the conference room and heard Victor's men talking. A name, a location, a detail that wasn't in Adrian's intel. It was the key. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was my moment to be more than a witness. I scribbled the information on a piece of paper, my hand shaking, and slid it under his office door. No name, no explanation. Just a small act to light the way home, to help them build the life they deserved. That anonymous note was my quiet revolution. It helped them outlast the war, to build a legacy not of fear, but of love. I watch them sometimes, from a distance. I see their daughter's laughter, the family they chose, the life they built from ash and hope. Their story was never perfect, never easy, but it was real. Lena wasn't the woman who first walked through those elevator doors anymore. She was no longer invisible or alone. She stood beside the man she'd helped save from himself and made him a better king. Love hadn't fixed them. It had given them the courage to face their broken parts and make something whole. It proved that choosing each other, day after day, was the only thing that mattered. And me? I learned that you don't have to be a hero to make a difference. Sometimes, all it takes is one small act of courage to tip the scales, to ensure that a story like theirs gets the ending it deserves. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.